Welcome back. In today's module, we are going to go over something really important and fundamental to the SQL language, and that is CTEs. So we're breaking this up into two different parts. First, we're going to go over CTEs, easy as 1, 2, 3. That'll take 15 minutes. And then we're going to look at a counterpart to a CTE called a subquery. And if you have been practicing SQL in the past before you started this course, subqueries is a very important topic. CTEs, this is the same thing. It's just a different way to do it. So the CTEs will take 15 minutes and the subqueries will take 8. And then in the next module, we'll go over a practice example on doing both of them. So with that, let's get started. If you've gotten this far in the course, is there a way where we can do multiple queries together? A lot of the queries that we've done, while they've been kind of advanced and we've started growing them and doing a lot of cool things with it, you might think, well, maybe I want to do more than just sum up my table. Maybe I want to sum it and then I want to do something else. BigQuery and the SQL language has a great way in order to link or do multiple types of queries within one big master code statement. And we're going to call that chaining queries. So what is a chained query? A chained query, like I just said, is multiple queries. So not just having a select star where blah, but you do that and then you do something else and then you do something else. This is formally called a subquery or a CTE. CTE stands for Common Table Expression. Regardless of which one you're using, they're actually the same way. It's two sides of the same coin. And we're going to learn how to do both because you really need to know how to do both if you're going to be a data analyst. Subquery is the way that you used to chain queries originally. That's how everything started. And as SQL grew as a language, as coding became more complex, there was a need to come up with different ways for analysts to be able to write really complex queries. And so then that's when CTEs were developed. If you work at an old company, people might exclusively use subqueries. If you work at a newer one, people are probably going to lean more towards the CTEs, but you need to know how to do both because any code that you inherit is undoubtedly going to have subqueries and CTEs within them. It allows you to do more analysis in a single step. So when I first started learning how to code, I would do one query and I would save it as a table, and then I would query that table, and then I would do something else, and then I'd do something else, and I would just keep writing and creating all of these like table steps. And it's a lot of clutter and it's not a good way to code. By doing CTEs or subqueries, you're able to write really streamlined code and do a lot of fancy footwork in one single step. This is also a huge interview topic. If you're going to put on your resume that you know how to do SQL, one of the expectations is that you understand subqueries and CTEs. And you might have an interview question asking you the difference between them. You might be given a technical assessment with the expectation that you're going to need to use subquery CTE. So this is very important. A lot of people struggle with CTEs and subqueries, and I did when I first started too, until I realized that if you format your queries properly, then it's actually not very complicated at all. So when you're writing your subqueries and your CTEs, I implore you, please make sure that you're following the format that I'm using and you're not going to get lost. If you start putting everything on one line and kind of deviating from the path, you're going to get lost in the sauce and it's going to be really hard to debug your queries. So what does a CTE look like in abstract? So we start with query 1. We did whatever we did. And then we use that query to write query 2. So query 2 is using something from query 1. Let's look at how you would write a CTE in the BigQuery console. Start your CTE using a with statement. You name your CTE something with meaning, and then you write your next query and use the CTE in the from statement. So here's the example. We have with, this starts our CTE. Just like case starts our conditional logic, with lets BigQuery know, oh, we're using CTE. With labeled data as, so this query in here, the select star and this number as n name, this whole thing is now going to be called labeled data. So this is query 1 in that visual that we had before. Then we do select star from labeled data, and that is query 2. So what is the computer doing? First, it queries labeled data and it saves it into its memory bank. So it does this little query and then it puts it to the side. The data is ready to use like a temporary table. It's not exactly a temp table, that's something that's a little bit different, but in terms of understanding what's going on in the computer, you can think of it like that for now. And then you end a CTE with the final query. So I couldn't just put with labeled data as and be done. I have to have a select something at the end. Otherwise, BigQuery is like, hey, you made all of these like little temp tables, but then you didn't do anything with it. What do you want to do with it? And it gets confused. As I mentioned before, formatting is number 1 when it comes to CTEs and subqueries. These are my rules for formatting tips. And I say rules because I really do want you to stick to it. This is not, I want to say, an optional. This is a mandatory. Okay, so number 1, always line up your parentheses. So you have your with, your rates, as, whatever, but these parentheses for your CTE, they're always lined up. Make the labels that describe the query mean something. So with rates as, blah. Some people might say with A as, with B as, with C. And that gets really confusing because you're like, what's A, what's B, what's C? If I call this rates, then I know, oh, that's CTE. That has to do something with rates or rate code or something like that. And the last one, leave detailed notes describing what the whole query does. And this is really important. Whenever you're writing something with a subquery or a CTE, it introduces a new level of complexity where I can't just run the query in one go and see everything that's happening. There's multiple parts that are getting saved temporarily and then disappearing. So it's really important that I put notes so that for myself, when I come back to it tomorrow and I've forgotten everything that I've done, that I know what I was trying to do. And more importantly, for someone who's never looked at your code before, for them to see, oh, this is what Candace was trying to do. And they're not having to guess or go through and parse everything out line by line. And that's really time consuming. So I put here, with rates as, pulls vendor ID and fair amount information. Okay? And then uses the query 1 and filters the rate code. Bam. Okay, so with that, let's open up the BigQuery console and try a CTE for ourselves. Okay, so for this example, we're going to use our example from query 33. That's the one that we did with the case statement. And then we're going to do the following. First, we're going to run the query from example 33, ordering by 1 and 2 and limiting 10. We're going to open up in a new query window. We're going to wrap the query at a CTE label and label it CTE base. We will use a select star from base. And then we want to compare the output from 1 and 3. So I saved this query right here already. So I'm just going to open it and put in a split right tab. And if that was a little too fast for you, you can just click this thing here. It's create a SQL query. I just did copy paste, hit the little arrow here, and then put move to the right pane. Okay, so I have this, and I'm going to run it. Okay, so we have month 1, month 3. That's as far as it goes because we cut it to 10. And then we have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here are the numbers. Okay, I'm just going to put that to the side for the moment. And now, in a new query, wrap the query in a CTE and label the CTE base. Okay, so I'm just going to do copy, and we're going to start our CTE. And we're going to type in with base as, and then we just open the parentheses and we hit enter. And this automatically lines up our parentheses nice in here. And now I copied my query over here, and I'm going to stick it right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab it in. Okay, so what you're going to see is that my select, this line here, this is like a visual guide. He's lined up with the from, who's lined up with the where, who's lined up with the group, and the order by, and the limit. Okay, BigQuery has this cool thing. You see this arrow here? How did I get there? I just highlighted over to row 12, and then a arrow populated, and if I click it, bam, it's gone. And if I open it, it appears. So this is just an expand or collapse. And you do this because, as you can see, this query is so long, I can't even get to the end of the thing without missing my instructions. So sometimes I want to be able to see my instructions, and I don't want to see all of the query because I know what's in it. It's not helpful for me at the moment. So I'm going to close it up. Now my cursor is here on line 50. So you see it goes from 12 to 50 because all those other lines are hidden away. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to hit select star from base. Enter. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, I have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for month 1 and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for month 3. So I have the same number of rows. So this one here, this is if I just run the query like we did last time. And this is if I do the CTE. So I wrapped the query in a CTE, called it base, and then I did select star from base. Okay, now let's look at total fare. On my first row, on my right side, this side here, which just has the query, the first payment description is unknown, and the total fare amount is $817,000 and change. And I look here with my CTE, and I see it's exactly the same. I have my payment type of 5, unknown, and the fare amount is $817,000 and change. Why are these exactly the same? Because they are exactly the same. I used a CTE, I wrapped this query up, and then I just said, give me that query. I didn't add anything extra. Now maybe I would want to add something extra to the CTE, because you might think that's stupid. Why would I do that? I just wasted a lot of time. Well, that's because suppose I wanted to say where total fare is greater or equal to 800,000. Now, I wanted to do where greater than 800,000, but because we did the fancy formatting last time, that turns it into a string. So let's just undo that here. So what did I do? I got my query before and I got rid of the format because the format returns an output of a string and we want to do some math stuff. So I'm just getting rid of that. And then I go back up to my line 13, see where the arrow populates. I'm sorry, line 12 at the parentheses where the arrow populates, and then collapse it. Okay, so I'm selecting everything from my query base, and then I want to return only where the total fare is greater or equal to 100,000. Okay, so out of the original 10 rows, I returned 6, 3 for month 1, 3 for month 3, and for unknown cash and credit card, and we can see, looking at these values, that these are all greater than 800,000. And if I look at my original, I can see before I had dispute, which is less than 800,000. He got kicked out. No charge got kicked out. And then it looks like no charge or dispute got kicked out for month 3. And I can see that dispute got kicked out for month 3. So what is happening? Okay, so what's happening is that before I had all of this space. I had all 10 rows. I had all 10 rows here, and that was base. But I said from base, only give me if your total fare is greater or equal to 800,000. Once I applied that filter, instead of getting 10 rows, I only got 6. And that's because 4 of these were less than 800,000, and those guys got kicked out. So that would be the 418,000, the 147,000, so that's 2, 124,000 up here, that's 3, and then the no charge down here, 352,000, that's 4. So those 4 guys, they didn't make the cut because they were less than 800,000 and I wanted more than. So that's how you use a CTE. Basically, you start off by writing your initial query, you wrap it in a CTE, and then you do a select and whatever else you want to do next to it. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint and wrap up this lesson. So in this lesson, we learned how to use a CTE. And in order to really solidify how a CTE is working, we compared it to our original example 33. So we had our original, and then we compared it using a CTE, and we saw how they were the same, and then we saw how we could use a CTE to make it different and do an additional query on top. And then we demoed these CTEs in the BigQuery console. In the next lesson, we're going to do the same thing, the same example, but using the subquery technique. See you then. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would be so appreciative if you could like the video and subscribe to help me create more content for you. Thank you.